the glittering stage of Oxford Street, a ruthless financier is stabbed in a dark alley, a cryptic note marking his doom. When his secretary is strangled, the specter of the ghost haunts London's heart. Enter Hercule Poirot, the master detective, unraveling a web of betrayal, greed, and a theatrical killer hiding in plain sight. Who is the ghost of Oxford Street, and what secrets drive their deadly performance? In this chilling mystery, every clue is a curtain call, and Poirot alone can bring the truth to light. Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Fog. The November evening draped London's Oxford Street in a thick, swirling fog, its tendrils curling around the gas lamps like ghostly fingers. The thoroughfare, ever vibrant, throbbed with the clatter of omnibuses, the chatter of shoppers, and the jingle of shop bells as doors swung open to reveal glittering displays of furs, silks, and festive baubles. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stepped delicately through the bustling crowd, his small, precise steps a stark contrast to the hurried strides of those around him. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his scarf against the chill. "Mon ami," Poirot remarked, his voice carrying a faint note of disapproval. "The English, they rush about with such purpose, yet they see so little. This street, it is a stage, and each passer-by plays a role. None? But who observes the drama unfolding?" Hastings chuckled, accustomed to Poirot's penchant for philosophizing. "I dare say they're too busy hunting bargains to notice much else, old chap. Christmas is coming, after all." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his green eyes glinting under the brim of his hat. But it is the unnoticed that interests Hercule Poirot. The glance, the gesture, the secret hidden in plain sight. Their conversation was cut short by a piercing scream that sliced through the fog. The crowd parted like a curtain, revealing a knot of onlookers gathered at the mouth of a narrow alley beside the grand facade of Harrington's department store. Poirot's curiosity quickened, and he maneuvered through the throng with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious demeanor. Hastings followed, his heart pounding with anticipation. At the alley's entrance, a young woman in a shop assistant's uniform stood trembling, her face ashen. "It's him," she gasped, clutching a passerby's arm. "The ghost of Oxford Street. I saw it. Him, there." Her finger pointed into the shadowed alley, where a figure lay crumpled against the damp cobblestones. Poirot approached, his expression grave. The victim was a man in his early 40s, dressed in an expensive suit of charcoal gray, his silk tie askew. His face, frozen in a rictus of terror, stared upward, as if he had seen something unearthly in his final moments. A single stab wound marred his pristine shirt front, the blood already darkening in the cold air. In his right hand, clutched tightly, was a torn scrap of paper. Poirot, with a handkerchief to avoid contamination, gently pried it open. Scrawled in bold red ink was a single word: "Ghost." "Great Scott!" Hastings exclaimed, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "What's this about a ghost? Surely it's some madman's prank." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A prank, Hastings? No, this is no jest. The word, the ink, the precision of the wound, these are the signatures of intent. But whose intent, that is the question." The crowd murmured, whispers of "the ghost" rippling through them like a chill wind. Poirot's keen ears caught fragments of gossip, tales of a spectral figure haunting Oxford Street, seen fleetingly in alleys and doorways, blamed for petty thefts and unexplained mishaps. He dismissed the superstition with a slight shake of his head. "The human mind, it loves its phantoms," he murmured, "but Hercule Poirot deals in facts." Within minutes, the familiar figure of Inspector Japp emerged from the fog, his overcoat flapping as he barked orders to uniformed constables. "Poirot," he called, his tone a mix of exasperation and relief. "Fancy meeting you at a murder scene. What's your nose sniffing out this time?" "A most intriguing puzzle, Inspector," Poirot replied, rising from his examination. "This gentleman, do you know him?" Japp nodded grimly. "Edward Marlowe, financier, rich as Croesus and twice as ruthless. Made a fortune in property deals, but he's got enemies aplenty. Someone's finally settled a score, looks like." Poirot's gaze lingered on the body, noting the polished shoes, the manicured nails, the faint scent of expensive cologne. "A man of wealth, yet he dies in an alley. Why here, Inspector? Why not in his office or his home? And this word, ghost, it is a message, but to whom?" Japp shrugged. "Could be a lunatic, Poirot. Oxford Street's full of odd types. That shop girl's babbling about a ghost, and now this note. Makes you wonder." "Wonder, yes," Poirot said softly. "But wonder is only the beginning. The little gray cells, they must now go to work." He turned to the young woman, still trembling under a constable's care. "Mademoiselle, I am Hercule Poirot. Tell me, what did you see?" Her name was Lily Baxter, a clerk at Harrington's. Her voice quavered as she spoke. "I was locking up the side door when I heard a cry. I looked into the alley and saw something, a figure in a dark cloak moving fast. Then I saw Mr. Marlowe lying there. I thought it was the ghost everyone talks about." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This figure, mademoiselle, did it speak? Did it carry a weapon?" "No, sir," Lily said. "It was gone in a flash, like smoke. I didn't see a knife, but... oh, it was awful." Poirot thanked her gently, then surveyed the alley. The fog clung to the brick walls, and crates from the store were stacked haphazardly near the body. A faint smear of red caught his eye, not blood, but paint glistening on the edge of a crate. He filed the detail away, his mind already spinning with possibilities. As the constables cordoned off the scene and Marlowe's body was prepared for removal, Hastings leaned in. "What do you make of it, Poirot? A ghost, a madman, or something else?" Poirot adjusted his gloves, his expression inscrutable. "Something else, Hastings. Always something else. The ghost of Oxford Street is no spirit, but a human hand cloaked in mystery. We shall unmask it, you and I, with method and order." The fog thickened, swallowing the lights of Oxford Street as Poirot and Hastings stepped back into the crowd. Behind them, the alley lay silent, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 2. The Cast of Shadows. The morning after Edward Marlowe's murder, the fog had lifted from London, leaving Oxford Street bathed in a pale, wintry light that did little to warm the chill in Hercule Poirot's bones. He sat in the drawing room of Marlowe's Mayfair townhouse, a study in opulence with its mahogany paneling, Persian rugs, and crystal chandelier that caught the sunlight in prismatic gleams. Poirot, impeccable in a charcoal suit, sipped a tisane, his sharp green eyes scanning the room. Captain Hastings, less at ease, shifted in a velvet-upholstered chair, his gaze flickering to the heavy drapes, as if expecting the ghost to materialize. "Mon ami," Poirot said, setting his cup down with precision. "This house, it is a stage set for tragedy. Observe the grandeur, the excess. Such wealth breeds envy, and envy breeds violence. We must meet the players in this drama. Inspector Japp, ever pragmatic, had arranged for the key figures in Marlowe's life to gather. "They're a rum lot," he muttered, consulting his notebook. "Marlowe wasn't loved, that's certain. Let's see what they've got to say." The first to enter was Clara Marlowe, the widow, a woman of striking beauty in her mid-30s. Her black mourning dress, though elegant, seemed to wear her rather than the reverse, its severe lines accentuating her pallor. Her dark eyes, framed by lashes still damp with tears, met Poirot's with a mixture of grief and defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and cultured, "I trust you'll find who did this to my husband. Edward was not always kind, but he deserved better than an ally." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, my condolences. Tell me, did Monsieur Marlowe speak of enemies, or perhaps this ghost that haunts Oxford Street?" Clara's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. "He mentioned no ghost, but enemies?" "Yes. His business dealings were aggressive. He outmaneuvered many, and they resented him for it. But murder—" She trailed off, her gaze drifting to a portrait of Marlowe above the fireplace, his stern features immortalized in oil. Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands, the way her eyes avoided the portrait's stare. "And your movements last night, madame? You were where?" "At a charity gala in Belgravia," she replied promptly. "Dozens saw me there. I returned home after midnight and learned of Edward's death from the police." "Most clear," Poirot said, though his tone suggested he filed the alibi for later scrutiny. "We shall speak again, madame." Next came Leonard Grayson, Marlowe's business partner, a wiry man in his late 40s with thinning hair and a nervous tic that made his left eyelid flutter. He perched on the edge of a chair, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on his knee. "This is a ghastly business," he said, his voice high and strained. "Edward and I built an empire together. Property, investments. Oxford Street was our crown jewel. Who'd want to kill him?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Perhaps, Monsieur Grayson, someone who felt cheated by this empire? A rival, a partner, or one who knew of secrets in your dealings?" Grayson's tic intensified. "Secrets? Nonsense. Our books were open, our deals above board. Edward was tough, yes, but fair. I was at my club, the Athenaeum, when it happened. Ask anyone there." "Bien," Poirot said, his eyes lingering on Grayson's sweat-beaded brow. "And this ghost, did Monsieur Marlowe ever speak of it?" "Never," Grayson snapped too quickly. "Superstitious rot, probably some street urchin's prank." Poirot made a mental note of the denial's vehemence, then gestured for the next interviewee. Miss Evelyn Carter, Marlowe's secretary, entered with a brisk step, her sharp features softened by a nervous smile. At 25, she had the air of someone who had learned to navigate a man's world with cunning. Her auburn hair was neatly pinned, and her gray dress was practical yet stylish, suggesting ambition tempered by modesty. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, seating herself with composure, "I'm devastated by Mr. Marlowe's death. He was a demanding employer, but brilliant. I can't imagine who'd do this." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle, in your role, you saw much of Monsieur Marlowe's affairs. Were there threats? Letters, perhaps? Or whispers of this ghost?" Evelyn hesitated, her fingers brushing a silver locket at her throat. "There were anonymous notes, 3 over the past month, delivered to the office. They mentioned a ghost and warned Mr. Marlowe to beware the shadows. I showed them to him, but he laughed them off. I kept them in my desk if you'd like to see." "Most interesting," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "And where were you last night, mademoiselle?" "At the office until 8, then home to my flat in Bloomsbury. I was alone, I'm afraid. No one to vouch for me." Her smile was tight, as if she knew the weakness of her position. The final figure was Victor Lang, a former employee dismissed by Marlowe 6 months prior for alleged fraud. Lang was a hulking man in his 30s, his cheap suit straining at the seams, his eyes burning with barely concealed rage. He stood rather than sat, towering over the room. "I didn't kill him," he growled before Poirot could speak. "Marlowe ruined me, sacked me, blackened my name, but I wasn't near that alley last night." "And where were you, Monsieur Lang?" Poirot asked, unruffled by the man's hostility. "Walking Oxford Street," Lang admitted, his jaw tight. "I often do. It's public, ain't it? I was nowhere near that alley, though, just watching the crowds." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Watching, monsieur? Or perhaps seeking? Vengeance. It is a powerful motive." Lang's fists clenched, but he said nothing more. Japp dismissed him with a wave, then turned to Poirot. "What do you make of this lot, then? A grieving widow, a twitchy partner, a loyal secretary, and a bitter ex-employee. All with reasons to hate Marlowe, but who's got the nerve for murder?" Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs with deliberate care. "Each inspector wears a mask. Madame Marlowe's grief, it is perhaps too perfect. Monsieur Grayson's nerves betray a secret. Mademoiselle Carter's locket, it is touched too often, a sign of unease. And Monsieur Lang, his anger is honest. But is it all he hides? The little gray cells, they are intrigued." Hastings, who had been silent, piped up. "And this ghost business, Poirot? Surely it's just a tale to scare shopgirls." Poirot smiled enigmatically. "A tale, yes, but tales have authors. Hastings, this ghost is a creation, a veil for something tangible. We must find its purpose." As they left the townhouse, Poirot paused on the steps, gazing toward Oxford Street, where the midday crowds surged like a living tide. The red-inked note, the smear of paint, the word ghost. These were threads in a tapestry of deception. "The shadows, Hastings," he murmured. "They are cast by human hands. We shall find the hand that holds the knife." The townhouse door closed behind them, its thud echoing like the fall of a curtain on the first act of a deadly play. Chapter 3. The Phantom's Trail. The morning sun struggled through a veil of gray clouds, casting a pallid glow over Oxford Street. Hercule Poirot stood at the mouth of the alley where Edward Marlowe had met his end, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. The cobblestones, still damp from the previous night's fog, bore faint traces of the tragedy, a scuff mark here, a smudge of dirt there. The crates stacked against the wall of Harrington's department store loomed like silent sentinels, their wooden surfaces weathered by time and neglect. Poirot's gaze lingered on the smear of red paint he had noticed the previous evening, now dried to a dull crimson under the daylight. "Mon ami," he said to Captain Hastings, who stood shivering in his overcoat. "This alley, it is not merely a place of death. It is a canvas, painted with intention. Observe the paint, red, theatrical, not blood. It tells us something of our ghost." Hastings frowned, his breath visible in the chill air. Theatrical, you say? But why paint? And why here, in this dingy corner? Poirot's mustache curved slightly. Why, indeed, the little gray cells, they ponder this. The answer lies not in the what, but in the why. The alley was a narrow slit between the grandeur of the department store and a shuttered tobacconist's shop, its walls streaked with soot. Poirot crouched beside the crate, examining the paint smear with a magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. "This is no ordinary pigment," he murmured. "It is bold, deliberate, used for effect, perhaps for the stage. Non?" He straightened, his mind already weaving connections. Their inspection was interrupted by Inspector Japp, who arrived with a constable in tow, his face grim. "Morning, Poirot," he said, tipping his hat. "Got something for you. Marlowe's death is tied to a property deal, big one. That storefront next to this alley? Marlowe outbid half a dozen rivals to secure it. Worth a fortune and plenty of sore losers. One name keeps popping up, a chap called Mr. V. No one's met him, but he's got deep pockets and a deeper grudge." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mr. V, you say? A shadow behind a shadow. Most intriguing. And what of the notes Mademoiselle Carter mentioned, those warnings of a ghost?" Japp produced a folder. "Here they are, from her desk. 3 notes, all in that same red ink. Beware the ghost, the shadows watch, and Oxford Street remembers." Cryptic, but Marlowe didn't take them seriously. Poirot examined the notes, his fingers tracing the angular script. "The ink matches the paint, I suspect. We must trace its source, Inspector. It is a thread in this tapestry of deceit." Leaving the alley, Poirot and Hastings made their way to the contested storefront, a handsome building with boarded windows and a faded sign reading "To Let." Japp had secured a key, and they stepped inside, the air heavy with dust and the faint scent of mildew. The interior was a cavernous space, its marble floors scuffed but grand, its walls adorned with peeling gilt. Poirot's eyes roamed the room, settling on a small office tucked in the back. There, beneath a pile of papers, he found a ledger, its leather cover embossed with Marlowe's initials. "Voilà," Poirot said, opening it. The pages detailed transactions for the Oxford Street property, but one entry caught his attention. Payments labeled Ghost, each dated before a meeting at a place called the Silver Lantern. "A code, perhaps," he mused. "Or a person. This ghost is no specter, but a player in Marlowe's game." Hastings, peering over, his shoulder scratched his head. "Payments to a ghost? Sounds like blackmail, Poirot, or some shady deal." "Perhaps both, mon ami," Poirot replied. "But we must tread carefully. The truth, it hides in the details." Their investigation was cut short by a breathless constable bursting through the door. "Inspector, there's been another murder. Miss Evelyn Carter, strangled in her flat in Bloomsbury, found this morning by her landlady." Poirot's expression darkened. "Mademoiselle Carter, this changes the pattern. Vite, Inspector, we must go." The flat in Bloomsbury was modest, its single room cluttered with books and a typewriter, evidence of Evelyn's ambitions beyond secretarial work. Her body lay on a threadbare rug, her auburn hair splayed like a halo, her face contorted in a final gasp. A red-inked note was pinned to her dress, its message stark: Ghost. The room showed no signs of forced entry, but a window stood slightly ajar, its latch loose. Japp surveyed the scene, his jaw tight. "Same ink, same word. This ghost is getting bold. But why Carter? She was just a secretary." Poirot knelt beside the body, his eyes noting the locket still around Evelyn's neck, now slightly askew. Just a secretary? Non-inspector. She knew something, saw something. This murder, it is personal. Strangulation, it is intimate, unlike Marlowe's precise stab. We may have two hands at work, or one with two faces. He examined the room, his gaze falling on a desk drawer, slightly open. Inside was a photograph of Evelyn with a man whose face was scratched out, and a letter, half written, addressed to E. Poirot tucked both into his pocket with a murmured, "Most curious." Back on Oxford Street, Poirot insisted on visiting the theatrical supplier Japp's men had traced the red paint to, a shop on Drury Lane called Mason's Costumery. The proprietor, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, confirmed the paint was a specialty brand used for stage scenery. "Popular with amateur troupes," he said. "Sold a tin last month to a lady, didn't give her name, but she had a refined air, like an actress." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "An actress, you say? Describe her, s'il vous plaît." "Tall, dark hair, elegant, paid in cash and left quick," the man replied. "Didn't seem the theatrical sort, mind you." As they stepped back into the bustling street, Hastings voiced his confusion. "Two murders, Poirot, and this ghost nonsense tying them together. Are we chasing a madman or a mastermind?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression unreadable. "A mastermind, Hastings, who cloaks their work in madness. The paint, the notes, the ledger, they are clues to a mind that plans, that performs. We must follow the trail, and it will lead us to the truth." The day waned, and Oxford Street's lights flickered to life, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with secrets. Poirot, undeterred, felt the puzzle taking shape in his mind, each clue a piece in the mosaic of murder. Chapter 4. The Alibis Crack. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy drapes of Edward Marlowe's Mayfair office, casting a somber glow over the oak-paneled walls and the polished desk where the financier had once wielded his power. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's center, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the looming portraits of Marlowe's ancestors, their stern gazes seeming to judge the living. Captain Hastings, ever restless, paced near a bookshelf, his brow furrowed with the weight of the double murders, Edward Marlowe and Evelyn Carter, now linked by the spectral signature of the ghost. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice calm but edged with purpose. "This office, it is the heart of Marlowe's empire. Here, secrets were made and secrets were kept. We must peel back the layers to find the truth." Inspector Japp, leaning against the desk, flipped through a notebook. "I've got my men checking alibis, Poirot, but it's a tangle. Clara Marlowe's gala story holds. Half of Belgravia saw her. Grayson's club alibi is shakier. The porter's log doesn't list him leaving, but it's incomplete. Lang admits he was on Oxford Street, which puts him close. And Miss Carter, well, she's not telling us anything now." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, Inspector. The alibis, they are like a house of cards. One small crack, and the whole structure falls. Let us gather our suspects and observe how they react to the death of Mademoiselle Carter." The suspects were summoned to the office, a setting Poirot chose deliberately for its psychological weight. Clara Marlowe arrived first, her morning dress impeccable, though her face was paler than before, her dark eyes shadowed with something Poirot could not yet name: grief, fear, or perhaps calculation. Leonard Grayson followed, his nervous tic more pronounced, his fingers twisting a handkerchief as he avoided the desk where Marlowe's presence still lingered. Victor Lang entered last, his bulk filling the doorway, his scowl a mask for barely contained fury. The air grew thick with tension, each suspect a thread in the web Poirot was weaving. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the silence. "The tragedy of Monsieur Marlowe has now been compounded by the murder of Mademoiselle Evelyn Carter. 2 deaths, 2 notes marked ghost, and a trail of red paint that leads us deeper into this mystery. I wish to know where each of you was last night when Mademoiselle Carter met her end." Clara spoke first, her voice steady but soft. "I was at home, Monsieur Poirot, alone after the gala. My maid can confirm I retired early, overcome by Edward's death." She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, but Poirot noted the gesture's precision, almost rehearsed. Grayson cleared his throat, his eyelid twitching. "I was at the Athenaeum again, playing cards with colleagues. They'll vouch for me, though I left around 10. After that, I walked home, alone." His voice faltered, and he glanced at the floor, as if expecting it to betray him. Lang's laugh was harsh. "You think I strangled that girl? I was in a pub near Oxford Circus, drowning my sorrows. Plenty of blokes saw me there till midnight. I had no quarrel with Carter. She was just Marlowe's lackey." Poirot's gaze moved from one to another, his mind cataloguing their words, their gestures, their silences. "And the notes, the red paint, do they mean nothing to you? Mademoiselle Carter spoke of warnings, of a ghost that haunted her employer. Yet you claim ignorance?" Clara's lips parted, then closed. Grayson muttered, "Utter nonsense," while Lang shrugged, his eyes cold. Poirot filed their reactions away, then produced the photograph he had found in Evelyn's flat. A young woman, presumably Evelyn, arm in arm with a man whose face was scratched beyond recognition. "This was in Mademoiselle Carter's possession," he said, holding it up. "Does anyone know this man?" A flicker of unease passed through the room. Clara's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. Grayson's tick quickened, and Lang's jaw clenched. None spoke, but the silence was eloquent. Poirot tucked the photograph away, satisfied with the ripple it had caused. Leaving the suspects to stew, Poirot and Hastings accompanied Japp to the police station, where the chemist's report on the red paint awaited. The analysis confirmed Poirot's suspicion. The paint matched the ink on the notes, both sourced from Mason's costumery on Drury Lane, used primarily in theatrical productions. "Ah ha ha!" Poirot exclaimed, his eyes alight. "The ghost, it is a performer staging a drama of death, but who holds the script?" Japp scratched his head. "Theatrical paint? Sounds like someone's playing a game, Poirot, but Carter's murder, strangling's personal. Marlowe's stab was clean, calculated. Are we looking at one killer or two?" Poirot stroked his mustache. "A question most pertinent, Inspector. The methods differ, yet the signature unites them. We must consider all possibilities." Back at his flat, Poirot spread the clues before him. The ledger with its ghost payments, the photograph, the half-written letter to E, and the notes. He paced, his small frame radiating intensity. "The alibis, Hastings. They are not ironclad. Madame Marlowe's maid may confirm her presence, but maids can be persuaded. Monsieur Grayson's club is a convenient alibi, yet unverifiable after 10. Monsieur Lang, he is too close to the scene for comfort. And Mademoiselle Carter, she knew something, perhaps too much." Hastings, nursing a brandy, frowned. But what's the motive, Poirot? Money, revenge, or this ghost nonsense? Poirot paused, his gaze distant. Motive. It is the heart of the matter. The ledger suggests blackmail or a hidden deal. The photograph hints at a personal betrayal. The paint, it points to a mind that thrives on illusion. We must find the connection. A knock at the door brought a telegram from Jap. The Silver Lantern, the club listed in Marlowe's ledger, was a discreet establishment in Soho, frequented by London's elite for private dealings. "Tomorrow," Poirot declared, "we visit this Silver Lantern. It may hold the key to our phantom." As night fell, Poirot stood at his window, gazing at the twinkling lights of London. Oxford Street, with its ceaseless energy, seemed to mock the stillness of death. "The alibis crack, Hastings," he murmured. "One will break, and the ghost will step into the light." Chapter 5. The Hidden Motive. The evening air in Soho carried a tang of coal smoke and the faint hum of revelry as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings approached the Silver Lantern, a discreet club tucked behind an unassuming facade on a narrow street off Wardour. The building's exterior was plain, its only mark a small brass lantern flickering above the door, but its reputation whispered of secrets traded over cognac and cigar smoke. Poirot, immaculate in a black evening suit, adjusted his tie with a precise flick, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, who looked ill at ease in the shadowy street. "This place, it is a crucible where motives are forged. The ledger's ghost payments lead us here, and here we shall find a piece of the puzzle." Hastings glanced at the door, his brow furrowed. "A gentleman's club, Poirot? Seems an odd place for a murderer to lurk. And this ghost business, surely it's just a distraction." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A distraction, yes, but one with purpose. The little gray cells, they sense a pattern, and the Silver Lantern will reveal its thread." Posing as a foreign investor with Hastings as his aide, Poirot gained entry through a discreet nod from the doorman. The interior was a study in understated opulence, velvet drapes, mahogany tables, and low gaslight that cast flickering shadows across the faces of the club's patrons. Men of wealth and influence, their voices hushed in private conclaves. Poirot's sharp gaze scanned the room, noting the clink of glasses, the rustle of papers, and the occasional glance that lingered too long. At a corner table, he overheard a snippet of conversation between two men, their heads bent close. "Marlowe's death was no accident," one muttered. "That woman, he was a fool to cross her." The words were cut off as the men noticed Poirot's interest and fell silent. Poirot filed the remark away, his mind alight with possibilities. A waiter, summoned with a subtle gesture, confirmed that Edward Marlowe had been a regular, often meeting a mysterious figure referred to only as the Lady in Grey. "She came veiled," the waiter whispered, but her voice was refined, like quality, always left before Marlowe, through the back exit. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And these meetings, they were recent?" "Last few months," the waiter replied, pocketing a coin. "Always after he'd been at that Oxford Street property." Back at his flat, Poirot spread his clues on the table, the ledger with its ghost entries, the photograph of Evelyn Carter with the defaced man, the half-written letter to E, and the theatrical paint's connection to Mason's costumery. He paced, his small frame radiating intensity. "The lady in grey," he murmured. "A woman of refinement, linked to Marlowe's dealings. And Mademoiselle Carter's murder, so different from Marlowe's. Strangulation, it is intimate, emotional. The stab, it is cold, calculated. Two motives, perhaps, or one mind with many facets." Hastings, sipping a whiskey, frowned. "You think this lady in grey is the killer? But who is she? Clara Marlowe, perhaps?" Poirot paused, his fingers steepled. "Madame Marlowe. She is an actress by training, non? The theatrical paint, it points to her. Yet we must not leap to conclusions. The photograph, the letter, they suggest Mademoiselle Carter was entangled in a personal affair, perhaps with Marlowe himself." To test this theory, Poirot returned to the Drury Lane supplier, Mason's Costumery, accompanied by Japp. The proprietor, wiping ink from his hands, recalled the elegant woman who purchased the red paint. She asked for something vivid, said it was for a private performance. Dark hair, tall, wore a grey cloak, didn't give a name, but her accent was polished. Mayfair, I'd wager. Japp grunted. "Sounds like Clara Marlowe, all right, but what's her game? Killing her husband and his secretary?" Poirot's gaze was distant. "If Madame Marlowe is our lady in grey, her motive is complex. The ledger suggests blackmail or a hidden deal. The photograph, a betrayal. The paint, a performance. We must uncover what Marlowe and Carter shared." Back at the police station, Japp produced a new lead. A witness, a street vendor near Evelyn's flat, who saw a tall figure in a dark cloak leaving the building around the time of her murder. "No face, no name," Japp said, "but the cloak was grey, like the woman at the club." Poirot's mind raced. He re-examined the letter from Evelyn's desk, its fragmented text revealing little. "Dear E, I cannot continue this way. The truth must—" The rest was unfinished, but the E intrigued him. "Edward, perhaps?" he mused. "Or another." To probe further, Poirot requested Clara Marlowe's theatrical history. A contact at the Lyceum Theatre confirmed she had performed under the name Clara Vernon before her marriage, specializing in dramatic roles. "She was a natural," the contact said. "Could make you believe anything. Tears, rage, love. Quit the stage when she married Marlowe, but she never lost that spark." Poirot's eyes gleamed. A spark, oui, and perhaps a spark that ignited murder. That evening, alone in his flat, Poirot sat before his clues, arranging them like pieces of a mosaic. The ghost payments suggested a financial motive, possibly tied to the Oxford Street property. The photograph hinted at a personal betrayal, perhaps an affair between Marlowe and Evelyn. The grey cloak and theatrical paint pointed to Clara, but her alibi for Marlowe's murder was solid. Could she have orchestrated both killings, or was another hand at work? Hastings, lingering over a late tea, voiced his confusion. "It's a muddle, Poirot. Clara's got the means, paint, acting skills. But why kill Evelyn? And this Mr. V from the property deal, where does he fit?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Mr. V, he is a shadow we must illuminate. As for Madame Marlowe, her performance is flawless, but every actor has a tell. The little grey cells, they whisper of a motive hidden in plain sight. Love, greed, or vengeance, masked by the ghost." As midnight chimed, Poirot gazed out at London's twinkling lights, the city's pulse a counterpoint to the stillness of his thoughts. Oxford Street, with its glittering facade, concealed a darker truth. "The motive," he murmured. "It is there, in the shadows of the silver lantern, in the scratches on a photograph. Tomorrow, We shall draw it into the light. Chapter 6. The Ghost Revealed. The shuttered storefront on Oxford Street stood silent under a sky bruised with twilight, its boarded windows like eyes closed against the truth. Inside, Hercule Poirot had orchestrated a gathering of the suspects, a stage for his final act in unraveling the mystery of the Ghost of Oxford Street. The cavernous space, with its scuffed marble floors and peeling gilt, echoed with the ghosts of commerce past. But tonight, it was a theater for revelation. Poirot stood at the center, his small figure commanding the room, his mustache impeccably groomed, his green eyes alight with the fire of certainty. Captain Hastings, seated on a crate, whispered, "This is it, Poirot, isn't it? You've cracked it?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, mon ami. The little gray cells, they've worked tirelessly, and now the curtain rises on the truth." Inspector Japp stood near the door, arms crossed, his expression a mix of skepticism and anticipation. The suspects arrived one by one. Clara Marlowe, her morning dress a stark contrast to her pale composure. Leonard Grayson, his nervous tic betraying his unease, and Victor Lang, his bulk filling the space with barely restrained hostility. The air crackled with tension, each suspect a piece in Poirot's intricate puzzle. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we are gathered in this place where Monsieur Edward Marlowe's ambitions took root to unmask the so-called ghost that has claimed 2 lives. Monsieur Marlowe, stabbed in an alley, and Mademoiselle Evelyn Carter, strangled in her flat, both marked by notes bearing the word ghost in red ink. This is no specter, but a human hand, driven by motives most human: greed, betrayal, and vengeance." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us begin with the facts. Monsieur Marlowe was a financier of ruthless ambition, securing this Oxford Street property against rivals, including the elusive Mr. V. His ledger revealed payments to Ghost tied to meetings at the Silver Lantern. The red paint found in the alley and on the notes traced to Mason's Costumery, a theatrical supplier. Mademoiselle Carter received warnings of a ghost, and her death followed, marked by the same signature. But the methods, stabbing, strangulation, suggest a complexity of intent. Clara's eyes flickered, but she remained silent. Grayson's fingers twisted his handkerchief, and Lang shifted, his scowl deepening. Poirot continued, "The alibis were our first clue. Madame Marlowe, you were at a gala during Monsieur Marlowe's murder, confirmed by many. Monsieur Grayson, your club alibi is incomplete after 10. Monsieur Lang, you were near Oxford Street, but not in the alley. Yet alibis, they can be crafted, like a performance." He turned to Clara, his gaze piercing. "Madame, you are an actress, trained under the name Clara Vernon. The red paint, purchased by a refined woman in a gray cloak, points to you. The lady in gray at the Silver Lantern, meeting Marlowe, she too was you. But why? The little gray cells? They discovered a motive most profound." Poirot produced the photograph from Evelyn's flat, the man's face scratched out. "This, found in Mademoiselle Carter's desk, tells a story of betrayal. The letter to E, not Edward, but Evelyn herself, written in anguish. Monsieur Marlowe was having an affair with his secretary, was he not? And you, madame, discovered it." Clara's composure wavered, her lips parting. Poirot pressed on. "Marlowe planned to divorce you, threatening your inheritance. The Oxford Street property, his crowning achievement, would pass to another. You could not allow this. So you crafted the ghost, a myth to sow fear, using your theatrical skills. The red paint, the notes, they were props in your drama. You stabbed Marlowe in the alley, staging the scene with the note to suggest a phantom killer. He turned to the others. Monsieur Grayson, you were complicit, non? The ledger's ghost payments were your doing, masking your embezzlement from Marlowe's accounts. You feared exposure, so you altered records, but you did not kill. Monsieur Lang, your anger was real, but your presence on Oxford Street was mere coincidence, a red herring. Poirot faced Clara again. Mademoiselle Carter's death, it was personal. Strangulation, it speaks of rage, of jealousy. You learned of her affair with your husband, and perhaps she mocked you or threatened to reveal your plans. You visited her flat, cloaked in gray, and ended her life, pinning the ghost note to maintain the illusion. Clara's voice, when it came, was a hiss. You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot's smile was cold. The proof, madame, is in the details. The paint tin, traced to you through the supplier's description. The gray cloak, seen by a vendor near Evelyn's flat. The letter in your handwriting, disguised but not perfectly. And the locket on Mademoiselle Carter's neck. It bore a lock of Marlowe's hair, a token of their affair, which you could not bear. Clara rose, her face a mask of fury. Edward betrayed me. He flaunted that girl, planned to cast me aside. And Evelyn, she laughed at my pain. They deserved it. Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs ready. That's enough, Mrs. Marlowe. You're under arrest. As Clara was led away, her defiance crumbling into sobs, Hastings stared, wide-eyed. Good Lord, Poirot, how did you piece it together? The paint, the cloak, it was all so clever. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his expression serene. The little gray cells, Hastings, they see what others overlook. The ghost was a performance, but every performance leaves traces. The paint, the cloak, the motive, they formed a picture, clear as day. The storefront fell silent, the suspects dispersing into the night. Oxford Street's lights glimmered outside, indifferent to the drama within. Poirot gazed at the empty space, satisfied. The ghost is unmasked, mon ami. Now, let us restore order to this stage. Chapter 7. The curtain falls. The twilight over London had deepened into a velvet night, the stars obscured by the city's ceaseless glow. Oxford Street, ever restless, pulsed with the footsteps of late shoppers and the clatter of omnibuses, its lights casting a golden sheen on the pavements where tragedy had so recently unfolded. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of his Baker Street flat, his small, immaculate figure silhouetted against the glass, a tisane steaming gently in his hand. The case of the ghost of Oxford Street was solved, yet the air held a lingering weight, as if the city itself exhaled the memory of its secrets. Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair by the fire, nursed a brandy, his face a mixture of awe and exhaustion. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, "you've done it again. Clara Marlowe, the mastermind behind it all, staging murders like some ghastly play. But how did you know for certain? There were so many threads to untangle." Poirot turned, his green eyes reflecting the firelight. "Mon ami, the truth, it is like a symphony. Each note, each clue must harmonize. The red paint, the gray cloak, the ledger's ghost entries, the photograph with its scratched face. These were not random. They were the composition of a mind both cunning and desperate. Madame Marlowe, She played her role to perfection, but no performance is flawless. He set his tisane on the table and paced, his hands clasped behind his back. Consider, Hastings, the motive. Clara Marlowe faced ruin, not only of her marriage but of her fortune. Edward Marlowe's affair with Evelyn Carter was a betrayal, but his plan to divorce Clara, to leave her with nothing while he secured the Oxford Street property, was a wound too deep. She used her theatrical past to create the ghost, a specter to mask her vengeance. The red paint, purchased from Mason's costumery, was her signature, a flourish to distract from her hand. Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. And Evelyn's murder? That was pure spite, wasn't it? Précisément, Poirot replied. Strangulation. It is intimate, a crime of passion. Clara learned of the affair, perhaps from the locket, which held a lock of Marlowe's hair, or from Evelyn's own taunts. The half-written letter to E was Evelyn's attempt to confront her guilt, perhaps to confess to Clara or another. But Clara, she acted first, cloaked in gray, slipping into the Bloomsbury flat through the unlatched window. The ghost note was her final touch, linking the murders to maintain the illusion. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across the room. Poirot continued, his voice soft but resolute. Monsieur Grayson, he was a complication, not a killer. His embezzlement, hidden in the ledger's ghost payments, was a desperate act to cover his debts. He feared Marlowe's scrutiny, but he lacked the nerve for murder. Monsieur Lang, his anger was genuine, but his presence on Oxford Street was mere chance, a coincidence that Clara exploited to muddy the waters. Hastings leaned forward. And Mr. V, that shadowy investor Jap mentioned, was he just a red herring? Poirot's mustache twitched. Mr. V, he exists, but he is peripheral. A rival bidder for the property, perhaps, but not our killer. The police are pursuing him, but he is not essential to our drama. Clara's motive was personal, not professional. Her performance as the grieving widow was masterful, but the little gray cells they saw through her mask. A knock at the door heralded Inspector Japp, his overcoat dusted with the first flakes of a late autumn snow. He entered, rubbing his hands against the cold. "Well, Poirot, you've done it," he said, his tone grudgingly admiring. Clara Marlowe's confessed, spilled the whole story at the station. She planned it for months, ever since she found Marlowe's letters to Evelyn. The ghost was her idea to scare him, make him think twice about the divorce. When that failed, she took matters into her own hands. Poirot inclined his head. "And the cloak, the paint?" "Found them in her wardrobe," Japp confirmed. "Gray cloak, tin of red paint, even a typewriter matching the note's font. She admitted to buying the paint from Mason's, said it reminded her of her stage days. As for Evelyn, Clara said the girl laughed at her during a confrontation, called her a discarded relic. That's what pushed her over the edge." Hastings whistled. "Cold-blooded but clever. She nearly had us all fooled." Poirot's expression was somber. "Clever, yes, but tragic. Clara Marlowe was a woman of talent, of passion, but her heart was poisoned by betrayal. She turned her gifts to destruction, and now she pays the price." Japp lingered, warming his hands by the fire. "What about Grayson and Lang? Any charges there?" "Grayson, he must face justice for his embezzlement," Poirot said. "The ledger is evidence enough. Lang, he is guilty only of bitterness, not murder. Let him go, but watch him. He carries his anger like a storm." As Japp departed, promising to tie up the loose ends, Poirot returned to the window. Oxford Street stretched below, its lights a constellation of human ambition and folly. "This street, Hastings," he murmured. "It is a mirror of the soul. It dazzles, it deceives, but beneath its glitter lies the truth, always the truth." Hastings, draining his brandy, sighed. "You make it sound so poetic, Poirot, but it's grim, isn't it? 2 lives lost, a woman's life ruined, all for love and money." Poirot's eyes softened. "Grim? Yes, but there is beauty in order, mon ami. The chaos of crime, it is resolved. The ghost is no more. We have restored balance, and that is the work of Hercule Poirot." He lifted his tisane, its steam curling like a final wisp of fog. The fire burned low, and the night closed around the flat, a curtain falling on the drama of Oxford Street. Outside, the city moved on, its secrets buried once more in the ceaseless tide of life.